Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. It's been said that music heals. And on this, the day after Election Day, some people are probably listening to some music and kind of hiding a little bit, depending on what your affiliation is. We're going to take that concept of music healing and expound upon it. Therapy. Music is therapy. We've talked about that here before. And we're going to connect with a true music therapist. And this is all connected to a great organization in the New York City area called Baltic Street into Action, which helps people of all different backgrounds with mental challenges, physical challenges, even people who may be incarcerated, move their lives forward with the arts. The man behind that is Peter Jampel. He joins us once again. Peter, how you doing?
Steve, I've been better, but it's always good to be with you.
Same, same. And we're not alone today. Please introduce our guest.
Yes. So Toby Williams, to me, is an example of a person who's lived music her entire life and has brought her love and passion as a musician and as a jazz singer and vocal improviser into her work. And so we'll explore that with her and her current work at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. So first, Toby, thank you so much for agreeing to be on today's podcast.
Welcome.
Thank you both so much for having me. I'm very, very tickled and happy to be here.
Yeah. Sometimes we were talking about this just a few minutes ago. On days where, you're either having your personal struggles or the world seems like it's, aflame and the events of the day are just so powerful that it's hard sometimes to think about, you know, anything else but. But on a day like today, as a music therapist, and being able to get not only out of my own thoughts and feelings, but to be in a job where I bring music into the lives of other people, I couldn't think of anything that was better for me in terms of developing a structure to channel all of that stuff and just pour it out into the music. So, Toby, first, I think we're lucky to be in this profession. And I just wanted to give you, before we got into your work and background, just a chance to talk a little bit about what it's like for you as a music therapist to be able to come to work the next day and have this as our profession.
Yes, I think that music is inherently life affirming and allows for the breadth and nuance of the human experience to be expressed and felt and kind of consumed in a way. And so, yeah, it's a great profession to be in when you wake up in the morning and the world has fundamentally changed.
Mm.
So for me, the first thing that came to mind was Love's in Need of Love Today by Stevie Wonder. And I have a playlist on Spotify that is called that. And then there's a bunch of other songs on it. And, I woke up as director of the music therapy program. It's actually the Brooklyn Conservatory of Music, not the
Yes.
Brooklyn Academy, but
Brooklyn Conservatory.
yeah,
Sorry about
fine. We're close
that.
and related. At any rate, I have 20 music therapists who are going out into marginalized communities today, communities of color, communities of people with disabilities who are going to be really impacted by what happens politically. And so my first thing was, how do you help? And so, I can go more into that, but the point is that being able to help people help, it's like a whole other layer. And then the fact that you're doing it with music it's an incredible gift.
It's an
Yes.
interesting viewpoint coming from you, Toby. And we've talked to people involved in music therapy that play, could be guitar, whatever. But your background, uh, as a jazz singer, I feel like you're even more connected to the music.
Ah,
Can you give us your background, music background?
sure. I always sang. The famous family story is that I woke up from a nap when I was 3, and I walked out into the kitchen, and my grandma and my mom were sitting there, and I said, "I was born to sing." And my mom like wrote it down on a little piece of paper and put it in a drawer. And it was the family lore because I always sang even when I was a baby, like always like doobity ba. I don't know. I guess I came out scatting. And then when I was 7 or 8, my uncle sent me Ella Sings Gershwin, and it was on vinyl. And I just started listening to Ella Fitzgerald, and it was like something inside me came alive and felt seen, and like all the emotions that I felt could be contained in these songs. And I learned every single song on that album, including the verses. And that was kind of the beginning. And then I sang in school. I did musical theater and in college a little bit. But I started gigging and singing jazz when I was 14. I did grow up in a little bit of a jazz town, Santa Cruz, California. I grew up with Donnie McCaslin and some other jazz musicians who are pretty famous now. And so there was a community around jazz for me. And, then I came to New
Wow.
York to play jazz, as people do.
Yeah.
And how did you cross the bridge to therapy?
I'd actually majored in psychology and minored in music. And how that came to be is I was a music major first and minoring in psychology. The voice training was classical, but I was gigging and singing jazz, and I just couldn't put the two together. It made me feel very sort of like fundamentally disconcerted, not just musically, but as a person. And so I talked to my advisor in the music department, and he said, have you ever thought about music therapy? And what's funny about it is that I had completely forgotten about that conversation. I just decided to switch my majors. And then it wasn't until later when I was a musician in New York. And I don't know, I didn't like marketing myself. What I liked about singing was when people would come up to me after the gig and say, I had the worst day. I feel better.
Wow.
And I liked being in the community of improvising with musicians. So then at some point in my late 20s, I was like, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. It's not enough sort of with music. And then actually I found Peter. Like Peter is a big part of my story because when I thought about going into music therapy, I contacted the New York University office, and they gave me some people that I could maybe sit in on sessions. And I contacted Peter, and I went to sit in and meet with him at Baltic Street Outreach Clinic when it was what it was. And then I ended up doing my internship with Peter when I was in grad school.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that the two of you were so closely connected.
I don't think Peter
Yes.
remembered. I just
Oh, I do, Toby. I definitely do. Toby, talk a little bit about how being an improvisational jazz singer has set you in a certain mind frame to work with people in music. How has that influenced you?
Well, improvising is in the moment, and you respond to what's in front of you and what's given to you. So it's a constantly a conversation. I think
Mhm.
coming from an improvisational background lends itself well to music therapy because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to have an orientation toward playing music with the person or the people that are in front of us. So if your background is very rigid musically and focused on perfectionism, it makes it harder. It's like a barrier to overcome as you're becoming a music therapist. So that's the therapist part. The music part is just that, to me, being able to make music like at any moment is what jazz is about. And it's play, and people grow through play. Developmental psychologists say this, Winnicott. We are able to stretch our boundaries when we can go out of our comfort zone. But with jazz, what's nice is that you can actually improvise within a structured framework. So within a song. So there's some inherent kind of safety. You know where the margins are. And that can be created by a music therapist, even with like Dr. Diane Austin's method that I was so attracted to. It's just two chords going back and forth, and you can improvise with sounds and breathing and words that you can repeat and stream of consciousness. So I just think that jazz can be a very helpful yes and kind of orientation to life. It breeds resiliency.
Yes. And of course, the fact that as a singer, we all have a voice.
Yes.
And the instrument that we all carry with us at all times is a huge advantage, from my way of thinking, for a music therapist who concentrates on the voice as a primary form of expression and communication. And so, before we get into what you're currently doing, just tell us what that advantage really entails, Toby.
Sure. I, all music therapists use their voice. And all music therapists are usually using their voice at some point in every session. I think it's really important to be comfortable going from speech to song and continuing to sing. And that can show up in every setting. Like, for instance, working with kids with disabilities who are maybe dysregulated and in a classroom setting, and your music therapist coming into the classroom. If you're creating too much waiting time in between activities, there's a hello song, and then maybe you're going to do something with the shakers. Just the simplicity of being comfortable enough to, instead of saying, okay, the hello song's over, with guitar in the corner, walk over to get the egg shakers. Now we're going to play egg shakers. Verbalization can stop the momentum that keeping the music going retains. So instead it's hello, and now I'm going over here and I'm gonna get the shakers, and here we go. One for you, one for you, one for you, one for you. You can keep the group cohesion going just with your voice and the rhythm of your voice. Yeah.
How does this, thank you for singing.
Oh,
Because I felt like I got stopped in my tracks.
I can't help it.
Where does this magic happen? I'm trying to process it. So you could have said, well, the shakers are over here. We're going to get them. We're going to bring them over here. You could have just talked it. But when you sing it, it adds, and I don't just mean the pleasing of the sound, but it adds so much to the message and what it does for us internally. Where does that, how does that happen? Is there even an answer to that question? I don't know.
You mean in the body or in the brain?
Yeah, for us hearing you sing just basic, we're gonna pick up the shakers, we're gonna move them over here, as opposed to saying it. Why does the singing resonate with others?
Did your mom sing lullabies to you?
Yes, and I don't know why I love it. I'm trying to
Well,
figure it out.
I mean, there's something really primary about being sung to in all cultures.
Maybe that's it.
And there's also, biological and neurological effects of
Hmm.
music on the body and the brain. So when I sing, I'm releasing endorphins into my own body. I'm reducing my own cortisol levels, stress hormones. Everybody should sing today. Um,
Hmm.
but you listening, what you might be experiencing is, a memory. The way I sang that was directed toward children, so it did have a little bit of a lullaby type of feeling to it, a containment. And also, just there's a piece of music therapy that's about aesthetics. I could have sung it like this. And now we're going to get the shakers, and I'm going to get the shakers now, right now, right now. That doesn't, I'm still sort of singing, but it
Hmm.
doesn't have the same effect on you.
Yeah.
So I think that's where, with music therapists, our musical training is really important. It's not just that I happen to be born with a voice that can sing.
Yeah.
I want to,
You,
if I may share something, and this is out today, and it aligns with everything we're talking about. A neuroscientist, and he posted this on Instagram, says that live music engages our brains more than pre-recorded, mainly because of its unpredictability. Quote, your brain loves this because not knowing what is coming next is like a little treat. So you could listen to the same song, let's say on your Spotify playlist, or hear somebody do it live, but it's different because you don't know what's coming next. It's the same song, but the beat might be a little bit off or might be a little raw. But the unpredictability, I think there's some credence in that. Even with you just singing before, I don't know what was coming next. So it was kind of exciting in some regards.
I think that unpredictability is the power of spontaneous interaction, which has an enormous potential for fresh, new, original discoveries between people and how we can promote that. Toby, let's talk a little bit about the work in the uh, Brooklyn Conservatory of Music's music therapy program. I was looking at some YouTubes, and one of the principles of the site that music therapy was happening in talked about how she believed academic performance improved in her students because it really helped students regulate, release, structure themselves, create an outlet that enabled them essentially to concentrate better in school.
Mm.
Um, and that really struck me because music therapy in a public school system is a whole different world than working in a clinic. Can you talk a little bit about the nature of the program, what it's intended to do, and how it's working?
yes, and I love what you both said about the surprise of music. I think that that's threaded within the direction of this program that I'm about to speak about.
Hmm.
We're a conservatory of music, a community music school as an organization. And so having a music therapy program that's a clinical program within that lends itself to community music therapy, which is a specific kind of music therapy method, which is kind of blurring the boundary between the clinical space and the community space. Um, we serve about 2,400 people in New York. We have an on-site program, which is a bit more traditional in our building in Park Slope, predominantly working with neurodivergent youth and adults. Adult day have groups come. We do one-on-one sessions and small groups. We have recital, we have performance opportunities. That's where it goes community. But the majority of our programming is in public schools, private schools, community centers like the Flagstone Family Shelter, memory care units, and we're sending therapists into communities that are under-resourced for mental health, under-resourced for therapies that are more accessible for folks who are non-speaking or have a difficult time verbalizing their feelings and experiences. And we're working in a public school. I'm sending a therapist into, a regular school where they're walking up and down the stairs with instruments, or they might be moving into the classroom, but we might be working with 10 children. And what it brings to the community is a different orientation to the space, working with teachers and paraprofessionals and aides to see that there's a musicality to the way that we are as people, and working with people with disabilities with music helps to forge a connection, in addition to helping the kids on discrete skills like fine and gross motor skill, call and response, turn taking, all these regulatory things that help kids sit and learn. So there's like multiple things going on at once, and our therapists have to be improvisers. They have to be on their toes, and they have to know how to find structure and improvisation and play with both. So it doesn't get too unruly at the same time. And we see what music our communities like, and we have all their input into the music that's being made. So it's very symbiotic. It's very high touch. It's very fun. And then sometimes the clinical piece is sneaky.
Well, it's almost like you sneak the clinical therapy thing in there while having but fun with the music. But at the same time, you blend so many gaps, that you might be a child, could be a 50-year-old, different music, but it still amazingly works. We're just about, I look at the clock and I see it in disbelief. Like, how did that go by that fast? Because this is fascinating. I could just keep going. Peter, how do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, us sneaky music therapists. I mean, we're just under the radar. You don't even know it's therapy, and yet it's amazing. Look, Toby, thank you so much. I think we just got a flavor of how music operates, not just for the individual, but for the entirety of the educational community. Teachers, aides, um, children, therapists. It's sneaky, but it's also very obvious that the power of music to create community and normalization is an overwhelming
Mm.
force. So thank you so much, Toby.
Thank you. Thank
Oh,
you both
thank
so
you.
much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And the organization Baltic Street into Action. Um, so much to learn there. If this resonates, it's a nonprofit, could certainly use your support as well. Before we wrap up, we have a second here. You
Yes.
mentioned your playlist, Toby, and I was intrigued. You said something about Stevie Wonder. What was that?
Love's in need of love today.
Hmm.
Love's in need of love today. Don't delay. Send yours in right away. There's your
Whoa.
song for today.
I play music on the radio and have since I was a kid professionally, not even kidding, still do. I don't know that song. So that's my homework assignment for today. And it's funny you should mention that. Stevie Wonder, I was listening to you know
Uh-huh,
that song?
of course.
He's just amazing. It's just mind blowing, what he does. Yeah, there's your therapy. Thank you both so much for being here today. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Good to be here.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
Bye. Thank you.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.